The placard had hung on the glass for 800 years, and Dr. Sylla Vane had read it every working night of her life. TERRAN Habitat, Hall 7. Specimen, human. Status, extinct. On the night of the autumn inventory, alone in the dark with her datapad, she looked up from the checklist, and the specimen was looking back. Not the glassy taxidermy stare she had catalogued 100 times. Looking, tracking, breathing. The datapad slipped out of her hand, and in the enormous silence of Hall 7, the extinct exhibit said something. Dry, rasping, in a dead language no throat had spoken aloud in 8 centuries. And Dr. Sylla Vane, curator of TERRAN Antiquities, the only living scholar of that dead language, understood every word. He said, "Please tell me those are not my boots." The boots were in the display next to him, labeled Daily Footwear, Mid-Spacefaring Period. So was his jacket, labeled Ceremonial Flight Garment, and his coffee mug, labeled Ritual Vessel, Purpose Unknown. Everything the museum had recovered from the derelict freighter Cormorant had been catalogued, conserved, and displayed with scholarly care around the tall figure in the center case, which the recovery team, 800 years ago, had entered into the registry as a preservation mannequin. Remarkable condition, unusually detailed.
It was not a mannequin. It was Jonah Pike, flight engineer of the Cormorant, sealed into an emergency stasis pod during a reactor casualty somewhere past the shoulder of Orion, drifting in the dark while the war that scattered his species burned out, while colonies fell silent one by one, while the word Terran migrated from the news feeds to the history books to the little brass placard on Hall 7. The pod had kept him at the edge of life and spent 8 centuries waiting for conditions to wake him. Sylla did not call security. She would be asked, later in the formal inquiry, why the discovery of a living specimen did not trigger a single alarm, and she would answer with the professional composure of a scholar who has rehearsed the lie. Assessment required linguistic expertise. The truth was simpler and would have ended her career. The truth was that the last human in the universe was crying, quietly, in a glass case surrounded by museum labels for his own life, and you do not call security on that. You find the door key, you bring water, you sit on the floor of Hall 7 in your curator's coat, and you keep talking, in your terrible accent, in his dead language, so that the silence does not get him. "Your accent," Jonah said at last, hoarse, wrapped in the conservation blanket she'd pulled from stores, "is the worst thing I've ever heard. It's wonderful. Where did you even—" "Salvage recordings, flight logs, music." She hesitated. "Mostly yours."
That was the fact she could not get around, the one the inquiry board would circle in red. Stasis pods of the Cormorant's generation did not wake on a timer. They woke on protocol. Stable environment, breathable air, and the engineers had been very specific because minds do not survive waking alone. A voice speaking the sleeper's language, consistently over time. The pod had been listening through the glass for 800 years, and for 795 of them, nothing in the galaxy spoke human. Then, a doctoral student had gotten permission to do her thesis work in Hall 7 after closing. 5 years. 5 years of a young curator practicing her dead language on the handsome, quiet face in the case because talking to the exhibit felt less absurd than talking to the walls. She had complained to him about her funding committee. She had read him her thesis chapters. She had told him about her sister's wedding and the blue kite on the shore of the methane sea, and which of the junior archivists was stealing her labeled lunches. The pod had logged every hour of it, sampled the phonemes, watched its criteria fill. Language, consistency, presence. A world worth waking into. "You," Jonah said slowly, when the medical readouts and the pod logs and the impossible dates had finally stopped being deniable. "You are the reason it opened. It heard you." He looked at her for a long moment. "I heard you. Half dreams for years. Somebody telling me about a blue kite. I used to hold on to that voice like a rail in the dark." He laughed unsteadily. I know about your sister's wedding. I don't know your name.
Sylla, she said, and her voice did the thing voices do at the edge of composure. Sylla Vane, you laugh on Tuesdays. The recordings, your logs, you always saved the jokes for Tuesdays. I scheduled my inventories around them. There is a certain kind of quiet that two people build together out of 800 years and 5 years and 1 night, and Hall 7 held it until dawn. In the gray hour before the day staff arrived, she made him coffee in the ritual vessel, because he asked and because the conservation kitchen had something that legally qualified. He held the mug in both hands like a man holding a whole planet, and asked the question she had been dreading since midnight. She didn't answer with the archive summary. She walked him to the tall window at the end of Hall 7 and showed him the sky. Unfamiliar constellations, 2 moons, a shipping lane like a string of slow pearls, and told him the truth. Earth was a long way and a long time ago, and nobody knew everything, and he was not going to hear the rest of it alone. He looked at the window for a while. Then he drank the terrible coffee, all of it, and said the mug had never once been used correctly in 800 years, including now. The museum board, informed at sunrise, responded with the speed and grace of large institutions everywhere. They proposed a new exhibit, living specimen, extended hours, ticket projections that made the director's antennae tremble, a tasteful rope line so that patrons could file past the last human in the universe and hear him answer curated questions twice daily, 4 times on weekends. Sylla filed her counter-proposal the same afternoon, citing an ordinance older than the museum itself. Sapient persons cannot be accessioned as collection objects. The board countered that the subject had no legal status, no citizenship, no species registry. On paper, extinct. And Sylla, who had spent 5 years learning how humans fight, did the human thing. She hired him. Staff requisition form Hall 7, 1 vacancy. Living cultural consultant, Terran collection. Qualifications: native fluency in Terran standard, direct experience of the mid-spacefaring period, ability to identify ritual vessels. Salary: modest. Employment, it turns out, confers legal personhood in 11 volumes of galactic labor law that no museum board has ever managed to argue with. The director signed with the expression of a being watching an asteroid approach in slow motion. Payroll processed the first human employment contract in 800 years. His first act, as staff, was a memo correcting 41 placards. The ritual vessel was a coffee mug. The ceremonial flight garment was a jacket that never got warm enough. The boots, his boots, came off display and back onto his feet, and he swears the 800-year-old leather still fit better than institutional footwear. And Sylla lets him swear it, because some things you give people.
The case in Hall 7 still stands, glass polished, lamp lit. It holds a folded conservation blanket, 1 decommissioned stasis pod, and a brass placard that took Sylla 3 drafts and 1 entire night to write. Visitors expecting the old sign stop and read the new one, and the guides report that people stand there longer than anywhere else in the building. Specimen: none. Human. Status: employed. He is probably in the archive wing correcting labels. If it is Tuesday, follow the laughter. Oh, and if you're wondering, the funding committee approved Dr. Vane's next research proposal in record time. The title was Responsive Linguistic Environments: Why You Should Always Talk to the Exhibits. The museum cats were not consulted and remain, on paper, furniture. If this story stayed with you, a like and a subscribe genuinely keep these stories coming. It means the galaxy to this little community. New story tomorrow. Tony.